Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You had promised that you would be a chair and not a panelist, but I noticed from your opening remarks that you were a very avid panelist in support of BRICS. So nonetheless, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I have a 6-1 or a 5-1 disadvantage, but here I am in front of you trying to tell you that BRICS is neither in India's interest, nor is it sustainable, and nor will it go anywhere much further as long as we don't keep forcing it, the way we are trying to force it now. And let me say that the only reason that it is there because it's a nice sounding acronym, coined ironically by a US investment banker. So you pick up another acronym with a equally good sounding name like STONE, and you might well come up with a formation. And STONE would be Saudi Arabia or South Africa, Thailand, Oman, Nigeria, and Egypt. And I'm sure you will find equally enough reasons, peace, stability, development, prosperity, or, common vision, etc. in all those countries. And you can say, why not a formation, different continents, different groups, different times, etc., etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, BRICS, it's not my word, it's somebody, Bhaskar Chakravarti in Indian Express wrote, BRICS is MARP, which is basically this is mistaken as real policy. That is mistaking acronym for real policy. So it's basically that. And let me elaborate. But just before that, let me start off by saying that I attended 2 of these summits, one in Sanya and one in Delhi. And actually, I'm dismayed that the real push, as somebody said, came from when it was in Delhi, because I would have opposed it if I had not been the Secretary General of FICCI, because it is not the done thing to be the Secretary General of FICCI and oppose what your government is doing, and which is what I had not done. And therefore, I really am, and I soon after that, after I left FICCI, I wrote an article called BRICS, a costly pastime for India. And let me say why, going on now. I think in India's, and I can elaborate during the discussion, it does not help India to achieve anything in its quest for global governance. Everybody has said they are equivocal about your interest in UN Security Council. They are not going to support you in your stand in WTO, etc., etc. So global governance, I don't think it helps. In your domestic enterprise, and that is where I think India should focus its interest most at this point of time. If anything, it's a distraction. And India cannot achieve what it wants to achieve in global governance or in global community until it gets its domestic act together. And I don't think anybody can deny it. And what I find is that either in diplomacy or in international relations or policy making, we don't have the ability to say no. Any formation that comes along, we are very ready members of that. I have not yet heard of India saying no to any international global formation. And that's a distraction. But worse, it actually creates a lot of confusion. Because as somebody said here, we now don't know what to do with Central Europe. We may not know what to do with East Asia or Southeast Asia. We may not know what to do in Africa, where we are direct competitors for China. And when I was in Johannesburg, in Pretoria actually, and there was a BRICS conference, and I actually put it to my African friends, why don't you just get Chinese aid as much as you can rather than go through the whole rigmarole of putting up a new development bank, which is really which at best would be a good source of finances for Africa and not many of us in the Asian continent, because we already have enough multilateral financial institutions to work for us. So, and as I said, I'll elaborate, if possible, if required, on why it is not in India's national interest at all at this time, especially given your competitiveness and your relationship with China at the moment. And therefore, the next point, it is unsustainable because, as everybody has agreed, there is no common vision. But people therefore sort of try and make the argument that, look, why not? What's the problem? If you are different, it's probably better, then you can become complementary, etc. But the problem is that your structural features are such that you could never come together. Look at any example. Population. Ours is a growing economy with a demographic dividend, and there's a paragraph 44 or something which talks about 57, which says that everybody will enjoy demographic dividend. Russia, demographic dividend, is there something right? What will they do to population? You talk about another thing like human rights. What is your view on human rights? Are you compatible? Will you be able to take the same position ever on human rights? Corruption, is your view on the same as, if you talk about corruption, is your approach the same across all these countries? State-owned enterprises, they call it something else, state-owned corporations, that they will nurture in their most strategic and important interests. Is that your idea in this country at the moment of time? UNCTAD and G77 have been complemented in another para in the BRIC communique from Fortaleza. Are we sure we want UNCTAD and G77 to continue and gain strength over time? My point, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is pretty much zero common vision, and if there is one which holds it together, is perhaps anti-Americanism, or what is wrongly called anti-West, because Japan is included in that G7 that you call it. But some people call it anti-West for some reason, but actually it is that. And then you have to ask the question that is it actually in India's interest to join a formation where the only binding force seems to be anti-Americanism at this point of time in your stage of development? You may not be pro-American, you may not be its ally, you may not be whatever, but are you sure you want to be in a group where the only common thing is anti-Americanism? Is something that we should ask for ourselves. There is no attempt at even defining or refining an agenda in the BRICS. If you look at the 68 or 65 paragraphs of the Fortaleza communique, you will find that there is what I would call an LCM approach to agenda. LCM, when you have an HCF, you take whatever is common amongst all. When you have an LCM, you include everything which everybody says. So as a result of that, and the action points for the next BRICS summit, for the next 1 year, ladies and gentlemen, there are 23 action points, which range from BRICS University, health, education, environment, climate change, trade, investment, and lo and behold, a meeting on cooperatives in the BRICS region. So that you also got cooperatives in there, so that because somebody might want cooperatives, so why not? So with that kind of an agenda, it's just a formation which will end up in having a good round of meetings with all the bureaucrats and diplomats and ministers, I dare say. I don't know what comes out of it and how India gains in any tangible way out of all of this. Next point, that the only tangible thing that the BRICS have done, and which started, as I said, unfortunately in India, is this thing on the financial side, the New Development Bank and the Contingent Reserve ACRA, the Contingent Reserve Agency, or what is it called, the arrangement. Theoretically, as an economist, I can tell you that this is fighting the previous battle, which was from the Asian crisis. It was first started off with the Chiang Mai initiative. Then they wanted to put up a contingent reserve arrangement at that time. $100 billion for a future crisis of that order will be peanuts, will not be able to serve anybody's interest. Let me talk as an Indian. I would hate to see the day when India goes with a cap in hand to the CRA to ask for a bailout because you've got an external payments problem. You think in India anybody would permit you, even if you go to the IMF, people would sort of kick that government out almost if you went to the IMF for a bailout for external crisis. Imagine going to a formation which has China and Russia in it, and then ask, and because even in this you will have to have all the conditionalities that will be imposed on you for getting out of the bailout. Every country thankfully has now done its own insurance by building up the reserves that we have today, and we have $300 billion worth of it. I hope we'll never need this, so it's not. But in any case, the CRA, and for evidence, let me tell you that the Chiang Mai initiative has therefore until now never been used. It has been there, but somebody will say, oh, because it's prevention, so therefore that's not the case. Ask anybody in Asia, they will tell you. Along with the CRA, you got the New Development Bank. You got also in the communique a BRICS Export Credit and Guarantee Agency cooperation. You got a cooperation agreement on innovation with the BRICS, some inter-bank cooperation mechanism, some insurance and reinsurance pooling of the markets and pooling of the assets among these countries. All of this has to be seen with China's initiatives of already forming the Chiang Mai initiative, the Asian Investment Bank that they just created, and what are called the dim sum bonds, which is extending the renminbi bond market throughout Asia. This is China's game. China wants to enter the international financial market and oppose and present an alternative to the US dollar as a reserve currency. The question for India is that are we better off becoming a part of the renminbi zone, or are we better off with dollar as a reserve currency? My submission to you is that I don't think India's interest is served given the huge trade imbalance that we've got, given the huge sort of situation that we've got of the Chinese pretty much killing our manufacturing industry in the next few years to come if you're not careful enough and we don't get our domestic act together. I think that's not going to be done. So what is my suggestion? I think India should look to join a formation of intermediate powers. Let us not pretend that we are one of the big boys. By going to a club with a rich friend does not mean that you become rich enough, because you come back home and you know that you don't have power, you don't have electricity at home. This BRICS is something like that. So you would better off to join something like the MICTA, which is the Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, and Argentina or Australia. Join a formation of intermediate powers. Let the big boys fight for themselves. And I would suggest that Indian policymakers, diplomats, academics should be strongly advising the G7 that now that there is a vacancy, just include China into that. Make it G8 and be done with all of this. Because I don't think because this is the only thing that you want to do with this BRICS and SCO and all of the rest is to make China a member of the high table of the global governance. If the G7 would include it there, the rest would be all right. Thank you very much.